Welcome to Lawyers Who Learn, where we explore how attorneys' engagement and lifelong learning fuels their growth. Join us to uncover these journeys and gain insights for your legal career.
Kendra, welcome to Lawyers Who Learn. Super excited to finally get this on the books and have some fun.
So excited to be with you, David. Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. You were at a dinner with me in Cleveland, Ohio. Mm-hmm. And we were too far away from each other at the table. And I really wanted to talk to you. And I said, you know what? You should join the Lawyers Who Learn podcast so we can actually have a more intimate conversation through Zoom, but then other people can share it as well. So I'm glad
that's true. It's more intimate and yet infinitely more public, but we can do it that way.
I'll start with this. The reason I know that's okay with you, because I've read a lot about you, and I just watched the podcast you did with O'Brien. I think it's called The People podcast.
Really clever. Yeah. He does really clever things.
And there's two areas that were really connected and similar. One is when I learn something and it makes my life easier or better, I cannot stop until I share it with others. And it's so great to meet somebody. And there's many people like us, right? We're like, just like the ant colonies. We're the worker ant who does that. So I think that's something that drives you and who you are, correct?
Absolutely. I compulsively, almost where I have to remind myself that just because I learned something doesn't mean that I have to share it, but it is absolutely my first instinct.
Great. So we're going to dive into that. And the area that it's interesting, you combine what me and my wife have together. My wife is an MSW. She's a master's in social work. I'm a lawyer. But I also I think I consider myself almost like a social worker too, because I've done virtue testing for myself and just to understand who I am. And I'm really high in social intelligence or emotional intelligence, which I think makes sense. So I think it's super cool that you've combined your social work and your legal skills and your PD into this superpower. And that's what we're about to dive into.
I can't wait.
Are you ready?
I'm so ready.
So just looking at your background really quick, just to save you time from having to go through it, you have a lot of different experiences, and they go from you were an attorney, you actually practiced for a little bit, but then you also were professional development at a law school. You were also lawyer talent and PD at a AmLaw 100 firm. And then you were, of course, a consultant and and a coach.
Yep.
Is that essentially take your career from early 2000s to now in terms of where you've been and what you've done? And now you're the CEO of Esquire, which is a coaching and consultancy agency to help attorneys have more well-being in their profession.
Yeah, no, you captured it. From the early 2000s, I graduated from law school in 2003, and I did practice briefly at the beginning of my career and then maintained a part-time practice while I also, and these are the parts that don't always get included in the longer bio, but I ran for public office in 2004, and I ran a nonprofit from 2005 to 2008 when the economy fell apart, at which time I actually thought that would be a brilliant moment to start a business, which it in retrospect was not. Spoiler alert. But so I actually started the first iterations of Esquire Well back from 2008 to 2011. And that, to get into lifelong learning, I did a lot of learning during that time. And it did not go well. And I learned a lot as an entrepreneur who was not really able, as primary breadwinner, to make that work. And that's when I went into the law school and then had a beautiful 10-year run full of ups and downs before I then almost relaunched Esquire in 2021, 10 years later.
Got it. So being somebody in the well-being space, I'm sure you're and I heard you talk about it a little bit on your last podcast, very knowledgeable in Stoicism.
Yes.
One of the highest callings for Stoicism is running for public office. Just curious what your motivation, if that was your motivation or what brought you to that. And tell us, I was just curious about that experience because that is probably one of the hardest things I could think anybody can put to themselves to do. And we get whether the smallest office or the largest, just to go off on that tangent for a second, and then we'll dive, because talk about lifelong learning. As an attorney and a social worker, it seems an interesting divergence for a moment.
Yeah. When I studied social work at the University of Pennsylvania, before I really knew I wanted to go to law school, although I had been pre-law in undergrad for a hot minute and then got intimidated at that point. There was a raging case of imposter syndrome going on in undergrad for me, and I dropped my pre-law major and meandered through a number of other majors before landing on sociology with a focus on social work, in addition to an English major that I had pretty much already completed. Changed my major end of undergrad, went to social work school out in Philadelphia, just with I feel like I wanted, like so many people, I just want to do something to make people's lives better. Social work feels like a good way to do that. And so in social work school, it's a 2-year program. First year, we all studied the same curriculum. And then second year, you get to choose your own adventure. You either stay in micro practice, focused on one-on-one counseling, group therapy, that sort of individualistic practice, micro practice, or you go macro practice, which is social policy, nonprofit management, systemic change. And I think my brain just naturally, much as I love working with people individually, I have coaching clients, I love the one-on-one, my brain loves to think in systems and make systemic change to prevent issues from happening in the first place. So as I've moved through my career, that's actually been a through line, is just seeing like, where is the system failing and how can I maybe be a part of a solution there? And a lot of us that were macro practice then went to law school because we're like, how do you impact the systems of government that may be not supporting people to their fullest capacity? You become a lawyer and help change the laws or fight the laws or do something policy oriented. So a number of us did. I didn't do a combination MSW, JD at the same school. I came back to Minnesota to do my JD, but a lot of us went that route. And so after a brief practice running for office with the combination of those two things and that drive toward creating sort of social or systemic change, it made sense. And there was just an opportunity, and I was recruited as a candidate in my legislative district. And it was a fantastic learning opportunity for sure. You take away what you can from every chance you get. And I did not win that election, but I had a newborn baby. I was pregnant in law school. My little daughter was in a stroller, and I pushed her around on 10,000 doors and knocked them all. And I said it was a great lesson in many ways, not the least of which is business development. When you we have to walk up to strangers' doors and basically sell yourself to try to earn their vote. You get very adept at the variety of responses you may receive, some of which were very welcome and warm, and some of which were get off my property or stick the dogs on you and your baby.
So I live in Brooklyn, New York, and there's a candidate she's running for city council of my district. And what's interesting, very similar to you, she has a 6-month-old baby as well that was at the event. And she was walking around talking to different people. And she's asking everybody, what issue is important to you? What issue is important to you? And being somebody who I guess is high on social intelligence and cares about other people, for me, the only thing I cared about was like, what's this like for you with a 6-month-old baby doing all these events? Because I'm like, God bless you. That's I can't even imagine. I love conversations to an extent. Those type of things would be really draining, I can imagine, because people are looking at you like just, I don't know, not as a person, but as someone to vent. So I can imagine not only the business development, but the resilience of doing a campaign brought for you. And I'm sure you lean on it still to 20 years later.
All the time. And with social emotional intelligence, that there is a lot of that emotional regulation and that resilience that comes through. And I think I've learned that in a variety of ways throughout my life, had the opportunity to learn how to emotionally regulate myself. But when somebody is shouting at you on their doorstep because they disagree with you politically, just trying to stay regulated. And the strategist would say, don't knock on every door. I knew the index of who lived at what house. Like I knew how they voted pretty much just because the information was out there. And I said, no, I'm going to knock on every door, because if I'm chosen to represent these people, I represent every person. And I don't want to just be skipping over doors because I don't think they're going to vote for me, or they have my opponent's sign in the yard. And I did end up with a number of yards where they had at least both my opponent and my sign in the yard, which was a win. But I think also, when you think, why are you running? Having my daughter with me in a stroller for a large part of it, because we didn't have childcare and she was just out with me, and mommy daughter time in a weird way. It reminded me all the time why I was running, because it was her future. Yeah. I can always remember what year she was born, because it was the year I graduated, 2003, from law school. She's now a junior in college, taking the LSAT this summer. So she's taking the LSAT, likely headed for law school herself. And so this was so second nature to her, to just be out there advocating for what you felt was right and for a better, brighter future for future generations.
You sound like you were campaigning just now. I'm like, what? I
have your vote, David.
You just went back into campaign mode. I loved it.
Old habits die hard.
So you talk a lot about well-being, you public speak about well-being, and we're going to dive into that. However, because you talk so much about it, I can imagine you get into a cadence of talking about grit and perseverance and resilience, and then taking time to yourself and doing all those things. Is there a topic that you don't get to talk enough about that actually gets glossed over, or you wish people asked you more? And it doesn't have to be about well-being, just about your learning and your growth path, that you're like, you know what, this is a topic that if I gave Dave enough time to talk about, to ask about, or I'm giving you time to think about, that's why I'm filibustering myself. But just to think, and if not, that's okay too. We can just keep going, but I just always love to see where that path takes us.
Yeah, for sure. As you said, typically a lot of my talks are around well-being related topics and emotional intelligence. So I love that you brought up social and emotional intelligence, all of which I think are so critical to our success in the legal profession. And all of my topics, I think, are tied together in interesting ways, often under that umbrella of one of the 4 quadrants of emotional intelligence, or through well-being. But there's one that, as you asked the question, that I do get to talk on a fair amount of the time, but I don't tire of it because it's so related to my personal story, which is imposter syndrome, which I brought up earlier, not knowing this question was coming. So I didn't mean to tease myself there coming out, but I did, because I'm first generation college. I'm and thus first generation grad school, law school, first generation, a lot of things. I grew up in very rural northern Illinois. I live about 6 hours from my parents. I'm headed down there this weekend to go visit them. I still have a grandmother down there who I love to visit. Almost all of my family lives within about 10 miles of where I grew up, and which is lovely in many ways. And from a first gen perspective, it was really challenging. Like when I filled out all my own college applications and FAFSA forms and figured out how to finance all of my undergrad, my master's, my law school degree, I had to figure it out or it wasn't going to happen. And I also had a lot of imposter syndrome, because here I was, Kendra Nicholson from Franklin Grove, Illinois, and I just felt like a fish out of water all the way through. All through my educational trajectory, through running for office, through all these jobs that I was so fortunate to get, these opportunities, always feeling very classic imposter syndrome. Like, how did I get here? I don't belong here. Penn, I ended up being the president of the entire graduate student assembly, 10,000 graduate students. Here I'm just Kendra from Franklin Grove, just like feeling this. And yet I'm sitting on the executive committee of the university as the single graduate student representative. Like these super cool opportunities that I just never felt like I earned or deserved, or again, was going to be found out for being completely incompetent. And which of course I wasn't, but I felt that way. And so I love talking about imposter syndrome, because when I do get to give that talk, I use online polling tools, and like 97% of people, from summer associates all the way up to the most senior partner, say, yes, I have grappled with that, or I am currently grappling with that myself. And I think just talking about it really pops the bubble. And we all are like, wow, so many of us feel that way. And we feel like we're so alone. So it's so isolating. But in fact, the vast majority of people feel the same way. So I love to talk about that.
The first thing that popped in my head when you said that, I'm curious of your answer to this. Where in your life do you not feel, or your professional life or personal, do you not feel imposter syndrome?
Do I not feel it? I've worked really hard on it.
I'll take a guess.
Yeah.
My guess is public speaking. My guess is talking about on podcasts like this, talking about sharing interesting, talking about yourself, talking about things that philosophy and well-being and all the things that like have helped you in your life. I'm sure, I don't know. That's just my guess because that's where you get that energy. And maybe that's where I don't feel it either. So I figured there might be that connection. I'm just curious if there's some things you're like, where you feel like you're a superstar and you were meant to do. Or maybe not.
Yeah, no, I resonate with everything you're saying. And I think part of it is, first of all, as you were saying at the beginning, because I love sharing what I've learned, my desire to shortcut other people's path to success or comfort or well-being trumps my own discomfort in presenting it. So it helps me get over myself and get out of my own way to think maybe this would be of service to someone else. So that will always motivate me. If I can even self-coach my way through something, but think who you could help. Think who needs to hear this. Think who you can share something with that will help them in the future. That will always propel me into motion. So I can rely on that. I think it's just getting to know oneself over time. When people like you say, hey, want to be on my podcast? I'm like, what do I have to say that's of value to David or his audience? Every time I speak, I think you get evidence that you are providing value or that you're helping. And then that again reinforces that part of me that just loves to do that compulsively. My husband calls me aggressively helpful. I'm like, I will help you whether you want to be helped or not, but sometimes to my own detriment. But it helps me move through where I feel that nervousness or that anxiety or that imposter syndrome. But I do check myself. It bubbles up. It bubbles up in sneaky little ways. Are you saying anything new? Or because there really isn't anything new under the sun, right? We're all just amalgamating information that other people have put out there and hopefully in interesting and clever ways. But I'm like, do I have anything to add to this conversation? I hope so. But there is a sneaky little voice that pops in from time to time.
So there's one area for me that I was able to quiet that voice, and it's in my LinkedIn posts. In my LinkedIn post, where I focus on, this is something that I learned from Jerry Seinfeld a long time ago, where he learned how to tell jokes from older comedians when he was a younger comedian. And the advice was, don't spend one day a month and write 100 jokes or write that whole day of jokes. Just do one joke a day or 3 jokes a day, but do it every single day. And then your focus becomes not breaking the chain of doing it every day. And so when I write a LinkedIn post, I used to be like, okay, how many likes, how many views, how many impressions, all that stuff. And now I'm like, oh, snap, I need to write a post because I can't break the chain. And I need the post to give me energy. And that's just, I don't know if that's something you provide or you found in your life that when you focus on consistency versus substance, you're able to get through that imposter syndrome.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great tip. It reminds me, there is research out there. I believe it was a study on photographers, and it was similar. They did one group they had photography students. One group, they said, just take the best picture you can. And the other group, they said, just take a picture of anything, like every day for a month. And the growth and the actual outcomes were so much better for that group that was just like, oh, I'm just going to take one picture a day for 30 days. And they grew so much more and were so objectively better photographers by the end of the experiment.
I just read about that study in this book. I don't know if you ever heard of it, Arate.
Oh, yeah, exactly. It's a great study. And
did you read this book? Do you know this book?
I have not read that book. I love the concept of it because
it's 1,000 pages. So,
it's enormous.
But it's enormous. It's one of the best, most detailed handbooks on self-improvement and growth. And it talked about that study, and it's amazing because when you first read it, you're like, okay, it's the people who focus on the best picture are going to win, and it's not. And
no,
so that really puts it to light. Where I think imposter syndrome would really come out is when you're first trying, and you've tried it, like you said, you tried it in 2008 to 2011, you're trying to start your own shop. And I go on your website, it says coaching, it says consulting, it says public speaking, and you've acquired this knowledge over the years that you've organized to some degree, and you do that. Take us through how you got through imposter syndrome as an attorney, as a social worker, building your own client base in starting the business to what it is today.
Yeah, I think it's, first of all, just moving through the discomfort, getting comfortable being uncomfortable. And some people don't like that phrase, but to me, it's been very meaningful because I just think sometimes as human beings, we encounter uncomfortable emotions and they're just a part of the human experience. So acknowledging there's days that I'm going to feel more confident and there's days I'm going to feel less. But what are you thinking? I feel like you're having a thought.
My question more specifically is two things. One, was there books that you leaned on that got you through? Was there certain handbook, books that help you go through that? And is there a specific incidence or story of the first client you got that was either a coaching client or you did a keynote speech where you're just like, you were really in your mind imposter syndromed out, but you got that client and that helped propel you to the next phase? Because I think there's so many attorneys or law students or legal tech entrepreneurs who, the fake it till you make it. And it's always just great to hear if anything comes to mind of specific stories to that degree.
Yeah.
So books and stories would be the two things that were in my mind when you said that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, and that's why the reason I share that there's actually a book called The Comfort Crisis. I think that those are resources to help. And I will give you specific stories as well, but just to be thinking there would just coming to terms with the fact that I was going to be uncomfortable, because I think the first iteration of the business there were many problems because starting one's own shop is, I think, almost inherently challenging, and it brings up all your stuff. It's a fantastic self-development tool, but sometimes a painful one. And you think that if things are uncomfortable, then something's broken. But I think sometimes recognizing that's just part of the journey is it being uncomfortable. So to your point,
for sure,
I'm terrible when people say, "What books are you reading?" Because I have literally hundreds on my bookshelves, compulsively learning, and yet I get through a little bit of one and then I switch and I switch horses and I read the next one. So I was trying to think of some that might be they're not on this point. For me, on this point, it is more to your latter point, which was just getting hired and getting good feedback and trying not to do the imposter syndrome comeback of it was nothing, or well, anybody else could have done it, or I wish it would have been better if I would have had more time, or anything, but just receiving the positive feedback and that was really great. Or the best ones, of course, always, since I already showed my hand at what motivates me, is that you really made a difference to me. I just had a coaching client be like, if it weren't for you, I would have still been curled up in a ball off on my couch after getting let go. But now I just accepted a new job. Though that's what keeps you going and reminds you through the imposter syndrome that you have something to offer. And it's the whole thing, especially public speaking, when you realize or remember that people say it's one of the greatest fears that a lot of people have. And you're like, I get nervous, but I love it so much. And I don't know if it's how that comes to be, or we just each have our own passions and skill sets. I've been performing since I was little. One of my avocations is music. I've been performing since I started piano when I was 5. I started church organ when I was 11. I kind of love being up in front of people, even when I'm very nervous about it, which usually I'm both. But I think it's just getting feedback that's, even though we know I make mistakes every single time I talk, every single time I do anything, there's things I wish I would have done better. I go back and I update my slides, or I say, don't do that. I try to take a gentle learning approach with myself. Here's what to do again, and here's what to never repeat. But people still take something from it. So that does really, and they hire me again, which is, I think that's the supreme. And they're like, okay, you weren't just being nice, you actually want me to come back. So.
Two things. One, most people, when you ask for books to read, I give them even for me, I got to go on my Kindle or my app or Audible, because it's just hard on the spot to think about that. And I've been okay. To your point, I start many books that I don't finish because many books weren't meant to be a book. They were just meant to be a blog post that turned into a book. And so it's on them to keep my attention, to keep me forward there. And the second thing to the speaking, how many different keynotes have you done? Do you have right now, or have you put together?
And how many different topics?
Yeah. Like when you go to clients, you're like, I can do one of X amount of prepackaged talks.
Yeah, around 25, somewhere between 20 and 30.
Shut the front door.
It's maybe too many, but
No, let's break. This is fascinating. 25 topics. Can you break down?
Yeah.
Let's start with this. Who are your client? Take us through just very briefly. Are you focused on AmLaw, large firms? Are you working with the PD person? Are you working with individual attorneys? Are you working with sole practitioners? A little bit of everything?
Yeah. So mostly large firms, though not
Okay.
exclusively. Really, it's any organization that has a budget and wants to bring in someone like me, which is surprisingly, sometimes I'll have really big firms maybe not have the budget or not want to invest, which I totally respect at that time in that way. That's totally fine. And then I'll have smaller firms that are like, absolutely, that's like the deal of the century. And because they're really invested in their people in that way. And it's fun to watch.
All right. How about this? Maybe this will be an interesting dynamic right now. Tell me if you think it is. I run a company called Lawline. We're a lifelong learning business focused on CLE, but lifelong learning is what drives us. I love being in front of people. I do a lot of speaking, but I have not really, and I think I can do a lot of good work at law firms and organizations. I have imposter syndrome to get me, or I have ADHD. I don't really have imposter syndrome of actually the speaking. It's the process of putting together the presentations, booking it, getting in front of them. And I want to go out, not only to do it because I think it can have an impact, but I know the actual speaking and it will be transformative for the clients and for them and for me. So can you, in 20 minutes, can you coach me a little bit in going through your talks of how you've done that, as if, because I'm thinking about somebody else who is me, and here's that you're doing 25 talks. They're like, I just want to do one, or I want to do 5. I've written a book. I have the content.
Yeah.
I just can't get past that wall of I'm too busy in my day job or something else like that.
Yeah.
Do you think that's good content? I'm not sure if it is or
whatever
not.
You want. It's your podcast.
I don't know. We'll see. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. No, I pulled up my OneDrive over here with all my talks. It actually says 64 items in this file. So 20, I don't have 64. That's not, but it's a solid 20 or 30. And they're in various like some of them have been keynotes. Some of them are just what I call my idea jar, like their ideas in my idea jar. But I think I started with my OGs, which were eustress, the upside of stress, something I was really fascinated by, like how to make stress work for you, the imposter syndrome talk, emotional intelligence. So to your point, if a person was wanting to get out there and get started, clearly don't start with 20 different ideas. You just pick one, especially like you said, one on which you have written or thought a lot about or feel like you have a lot to share. And then I literally just open up a PowerPoint deck and just start dumping things in.
Sure.
And then it's so nice to just move things around. So I think it's seeing it, like I said, I was an English major. I love to write. So my focus was, I had a creative writing, but I'm a writer. I love to write. I write a weekly newsletter. I write a lot of articles. I love to write. So it's a slightly different format, clearly, but to me, it's still disseminating knowledge. So I'm just trying to make sense of a topic in a way that I think someone will receive it. So I just play with the deck until I feel like it's something that I can present. I also, sometimes urgency is my friend. So I sometimes will get hired for a talk that I have not yet written. And
100%.
whether or not the client knows that, sometimes they will hire me for a custom talk. That's cool. And sometimes there's a talk that I know I want in my repertoire and I don't have time to create it. And I know that if a client hires me to create it, I get booked 2-3 6 months in advance. I'll just create it.
Take me through, and we don't have to get into your numbers, but in general, for somebody because there's a lot of competition in this space, right? To speak about, like you said, these are no new topics, imposter syndrome. So it's you're positioning yourself, your experience, and how you are as a public speaker. What is the range that someone charges? I assume these are like hour to 4 hour talks generally. What is the range that the competition charges for this? Because that's the interesting component of it. It's you have to charge enough because you can't do these all the time. You can't do it 24/7. And even doing that, whether it's $10,000 or $5,000 or depending on what it is, what if it's an hour talk, of course it's more inspiration than coaching because you leave and they're just like, okay, they go back to the thing. So I just try to get through the psychology of, okay, what is the pitch? What is the talk for an hour or something? And then I assume 5 to 10 grand is usually the price point for these type of things. What is the USP that you're saying, okay, it's only an hour, but here's the takeaway that they're going to get and why it's worth, let's use 10 grand as an example.
Yeah. So you're right. There's definitely a range out there in terms of pricing, and it's a black box, partly because none of us want to be ever accused of price fixing, but also just because that's people's competitive advantage in some ways. We don't always know what everybody charges. And I always say, I just like to be in the middle of the pack. I don't want to be the highest. I don't want to be the lowest.
Sure.
And hopefully it works in your budget. But like the USP, what is that unique selling proposition? How do I show the value? I always try to have in every one of my program descriptions, like what I would say, hey, David, which of these talks do you want? There's always learning objectives. So then there's like what your people will walk away with. And I actually work with an instructional designer. Like I built all of my decks myself. And then I have an instructional designer who I ask to go through them all and make sure they're super tight from an instructional design perspective. Cause I
love that.
I'm just winging it. Like I'm a social worker.
No, that's fantastic.
But I vet them and I'm like, help me make
How did you find this? How did you find the instructional designer?
Upwork.
Yeah. This is really, this is helpful. And these are the things that people don't talk about. So I appreciate you getting into it.
Yes.
When you say, I understand the concept of instructional designer, but are they changing the design and the wording flow to some degree?
Some of it. So like I have all of my talks that we did a rebrand in October. So I've been slowly moving all of my talks from the old brand to the new branding. I'm not as hung up on that. I love my new branding, but some of my talks, I just haven't had a chance to convert to the new branding. But the reason I hired this person at this point was as we were moving everything over the new branding, I thought, why not use that as an opportunity to slide by slide go through and make sure that everything's as tight as possible, not just slap lipstick on a pig, but let's tighten up every single one of these decks because I've been developing them over the last 3 or 4 years. I want them to evolve and iterate and get better and better all the time. And I don't know what I don't know. Like I owe to the spirit of lifelong learning. Like I'm not an instructional designer. I try to keep up on all the trends, but I'm also off studying well-being and emotional intelligence in the legal profession. So she combs everything. Yes, does she make it? I have a fairly high aesthetic myself, but she makes it even prettier for me. But just like the way she would process through it, or she'll tell me like, actually the research shows that adult learning does X or Y, or have you thought about asking the question in this way?
Sure.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
It's interesting because there's presentations and there's storytelling.
Yes.
How important is storytelling and engagement I worked with a public speaking coach once, a couple of times. I did a TEDx, I did a couple big keynotes, and she was actually an actress. And her advice to me, it was improv advice, is you show up late and you leave early. And what that means is when showing up late means you essentially start in the middle of a story. Instead of starting, hi, I'm David Schnurman, what I'm going to talk about, you're like, I was at mile 23 of the marathon. And I'm like, that's how I started my keynote, like that. And then at the end, you end really quick and you do that. And so I was just curious, she also taught me to speak in present tense. I'm running and I'm looking around and to act it out. I don't know if that works in your setting and how much energy and time you focus on that versus just getting the substance across. But those are some of the things that that are always framed in my head. And I was curious how you handle those things.
Yeah, I love improving my skill set. I I love getting better all the time. One of the talks I give, I have collaborators who come in on topics where I am not the expert. So I have a sleep doctor I work with, a nutritionist I work with,
Love
a
it.
neuropsychiatrist I work with. Like, these are out of my zones of genius, and yet they're topics that I think are relevant and important. So we co-present these, and we just presented the one with the neuropsychiatrist last week, and we've done it several times together. But I love it when he talks about how the brain loves a challenge. Like, it loves to stretch itself and learn a little bit, like just have enough of a stretch that it can accomplish and learn. And then it's so very satisfying and it wants to keep doing it. And I said, yeah, I actually experienced that. As I shared, I'm a musician. And I do that avocationally. Like, I'm a church musician. I play 2 out of 4 Sundays. I'm off subbing at a church in the Twin Cities here in Minnesota. Sometimes on very short notice, because people know I'm a very solid sight reader, which means you can just put a piece of music in front of me and I can generally read it either on piano or pipe organ. But it is terrifying at times. And my brain loves the stretch and then the satisfaction of a job well done or learning something. So I love learning my craft. In that case, it was music. In this case, it's speaking. And so I'm always reading like tips and tricks, and both how to do the slides, how to put together the presentation, but what words come out of my mouth, how to tell the story, how to engage the audience. I think there's a slight difference that I try to thread between training and like keynoting, where I think the training side, the CLE, I try to bring in a lot of the storytelling and engagement tools, but they're also expecting to learn something. You're qualified for CLE credit. You want to disseminate some information. I always try to inspire or move people in some way, but they also are like getting their ethics credit. So it's a little bit of both, but I love learning those skills and constantly.
How many talks have you given, would you say?
Oh gosh. Oh.
Ballpark.
Well over 100, probably 100 to 150 at least.
And are these 1 hour talks or sometimes they're 4 hour workshops?
Most often 1 hour talks.
Okay. And Are you traveling for most of them?
Some of them. I actually do a lot of webinars, which is a unique opportunity as well, to really try to engage someone when literally, like right now, all I see is you. Many times, all I see is myself and a little white dot on the camera. That's tough. And trying to, like, for an hour, talk to yourself and keep some imaginary person on the other end of the screen engaged. It's a fantastic challenge. I love it. I try to just imagine them out there learning.
It's like teaching a CLE course, right? That's essentially all. It really is.
Yeah.
And so I understand what you were sharing about how you put together the content, and I'm sure we can have a full 8 hours breaking that down, and maybe you should teach that at some point. And I understand how you keep engaging. Take us through the part that's the hardest learning component: closing the deal, getting the business. How have you gone from a social worker to a lawyer to somebody who now is combining those, but also has to close the deal to be able to not just anybody, everybody has to sell, but like, how have you adapted to that process and learned there?
Yeah. And again, I don't think it was ever anything that I was like, I'm going to learn how to sell now. But but you have to. And then so like I mentioned, I think I've had lots of opportunity to sell things. I'm just a born entrepreneur. Like, I was the kiddo, like many of us, maybe like you, David. Many of us had lemonade stands, but I was there with a P&L sheet. I was like figuring out how much each cup cost and the lemonade. I'm not proud of this, but I charged my sister for piano lessons at one point in my trajectory. That's not okay, but it makes for a good story. Like, I was always looking for ways to make money. I sold like jewelry out of a catalog. I tried to publish a book when I was like 12. I like selling things. I like figuring out ways to exchange value for money. And so I think I've always dabbled. And then certainly starting my own business in 2008, as I mentioned, I think running for office was actually an extreme form of sales. I think it taught me more than I would have ever anticipated about that. Very unintentional, but welcome learning. And then I actually started my business after that. Didn't really know how to sell, partly because I was not confident in my offer. And so I think that's so crucial, is I can sell well. I trust myself to sell because I'm very genuine. If I think there's value in something, I will tell you why. Very genuine. And if I don't, I will tell you there's no value there. I'm very honest about it. But I think I did not believe in myself, and I was my product that first time out. And it was part of what sunk me, along with a variety of other things, but that was really a huge component. So you have to believe in your product and what you're offering, and that the value even exceeds the investment.
Yeah.
And so I just think, and then from there I actually parlayed some of that. I went to the law school, but then I was a manager of business development at an IP firm, and I was teaching the attorneys how to sell. And I was actually BD/sales. Like, I was going out to the clients and selling them on the firm and bringing them back in and connecting them with the right team of attorneys to supply the legal delivery, which I really love, just satisfying people's needs. I love problem solving. And I think that's what sales is, right? You have a problem, you need X. I can either do Y, or I know who can. So let's just connect the dots. I'm like a matchmaker. So I think that's where it gets into networking and just really listening carefully for what people need and figuring out ways to supply it. So I just think they're back to emotional intelligence. That's why I teach emotional intelligence and business development together, because I think BD is all EQ. It's just listening,
Totally.
and matching needs with what you have to offer.
What do you think? So we have a subscription for $299 for 2,000 hours of content.
Yes.
Top-notch content.
Yep.
On all different areas. What do you think separates a $10,000 1 hour talk, or $5,000, whatever, to a 1 hour CLE? A really good one that sort of breaks down how to law practice management, how to grow your practice, how to go through all that. And it takes you through it, and there's real takeaways. Yeah. Explain that.
Again, since I feel like we're speaking very candidly to each other and countless others who will listen to this on demand later, but to your point, so I am one of your amazing faculty members for Lawline. Okay. So I've got some programs on Lawline. I hope we're speaking this is my thought process as a business owner.
That's what we're.
All right. Okay.
Anyone who gets this far, they get the goods. They get the real goods.
The goods. And as you noted, I'm super transparent about what's worked in my business, what has not, and I'm very honest about my first business failure, which I'm just okay to call it that. Let's not make it it was really hard and it did not work, because I don't want people to see what I've done in 3.5 years at this point and be like, oh, look, Kendra built all this and I'm going to quit my job and start a speaking business. Like, that would destroy you and your family. Like, and so please. So I appreciate that. Very honest. I don't want, because it was hard on us financially along with everything else. So I'm always happy to share that information. But my business owner, CEO thinking, when I'm like, sure, I'll have 2 programs. 2 of my top programs are on Lawline. Okay. So 2 of the ones I've already mentioned, EQ and Eustress, are on Lawline. And somebody can watch that. I get like lovely little LinkedIn notes from people who have watched my program on Lawline as part of their $299 subscription, through which they have access to thousands of programs, including mine. Okay. Why would I do that if I think, oh, well, then they're not going to hire me for my price point to come to their organization? It's a totally different product to me. So I think I think Lawline's amazing. I wouldn't be with you as a faculty person if I didn't. I think it solves a problem for a particular audience. I think when my organizations hire me to come in person or on a webinar, they're buying something different. They're buying something that's more personalized, more customized, more curated. They're buying the opportunity to do live Q&A with me, which only like a small subset that was there live for our program got to do. They get my email address. They get it. Everything feels just elevated, and they're buying that. And it's just for their people. So they feel like it's just their people in that physical room or that virtual room. So it's just a different product, and they could do both. A lot of my organizations have subscriptions to the Lawlines of the world, and they bring me in, because nothing really replaces the real in the flesh, or at least in the moment virtually, person. And I think it's just reminding people of that.
I love that said in so many different ways. Many times it's the value that the individual or the organization puts on it. We charge $299 for 2,000 courses. Maybe if we charged $299 a course or whatever it is. So that's one. Two, the other component, 100%, there's an actual need that they're trying to solve, and they need somebody to come in there and do that. And an on-demand asynchronous video, or even if it's a live webcast, that's not, it's that last 5% that makes all the difference. And so let's talk about that last 5%. I once saw someone named Sean Stevenson give a speech. He recently passed away, but he had a back issue. So he was only like 2 feet tall, but he was such a motivational speaker. And he said so many great things. And one of the things that he said that stuck with me, he's like, most motivational speeches, they're like a shower. They feel really good. They're warm. They're fuzzy. But by the next day, the 2 days later, you're dirty again. They're gone. You need to consistently do something. And I'm just curious, where do you think your clients' expectations are if you're only doing a 1-hour talk of what they're looking for the long-term outcomes to be? And not just from you, but from anybody who's doing that, because that is something where imposter syndrome goes in my head, because I can inspire and empower, but I know just from my own personal life, those things, we all get so busy. So I was wondering how you communicate that or how your clients deal with that.
I think a lot of organizations, one of their immediate outcomes is providing some knowledge just for an hour. Sometimes it's CLE accredited, so they're trying to help people check their boxes for licensure and for renewals. So that's an easy outcome and it makes sense. But to your point, I love to help them do that, but my goal is that something lingers longer than the shower, that something sticks with that audience. And so I try to think about it in terms of very practical skill sets that they can take away. So always making sure that there's some practical tools, getting people as engaged as possible. And that's another thing that you get to have when someone's live, that asynchronous is a little trickier, is to like really engage, be a part of the online polling, be a part of the chat, ask your question and get an answer, to really feel like you get what you came for. Many times I ask at the beginning what people came for, and I try to make sure that by the end, I have checked all those boxes that I have kept in my mind to make sure people are walking away. Of course, like handouts and takeaways. And I try to the extent that someone will let me into their world through my newsletter or a blog or a LinkedIn connection or whatever it is, just to have some ongoing contact. But like you said, we all get busy. So I just I'm like, what's one key takeaway? At the end of every session, what's one key takeaway that you can hopefully go out and implement or remember or use with your team or whatever it is. But the world is full of information. And I think that's the challenge and the opportunity, is to make sure we're sharing something and sharing an emotional experience, which is also what I try to have with people. Is I'm not just dropping knowledge on you. Like, I'm really here and I really genuinely care. And I think sometimes just feeling like somebody really cares about your success and well-being makes a huge difference.
Said, first of all, for speaking, many times the goal is not only just to do one-time things. I see you also do coaching. Is your bread and butter the speaking side or the coaching side?
Primarily right now, the speaking side, but I say I have a 3-legged stool, which is the speaking, and then coaching, and then my Esquire Well Academy, which is a more interactive, ongoing academy. It has some on, so we record our master classes, we record things, and so people can access that on demand and asynchronously as a recording if they can't attend live. But we have things like yoga and desk yoga, meditation, group coaching, Q&As, like just, it's fun for me to be able to drop just information that feels relevant and useful to people in a singular place at a highly leveraged price point. So again, it's easy access for organizations or individuals who maybe don't even have this kind of support through their organization, and certainly for organizations to be able to provide that ongoing care. So between the coaching, the speaking, and the academy, people can dip in wherever they want. One-on-one is going to be the most intensive. A speaking engagement has an individualized feel, but it's one-to-many. And then the academy is on demand, but it's like a library, it's like a Netflix of well-being and professional development tools.
And I love the 3-legged stool analogy. And in the last few minutes, because it's late on a Tuesday. Are you, in your mind, so cliche, but are you living the dream with this three-legged stool analogy? And I know to some degree there's always, okay, what's next? What is your focus and goal? Is it scaling? Is it your own well-being and it's not scaling? It's actually working only a certain amount of hours per week. Is it something else? How do you see yourself and your impact over the next, let's say, I don't know, 5 years? You're the coach. You tell me better. But how do you see that? What is your vision if you've actually put that together in terms of, one, are you living the dream? And then where does it go?
Yeah, I think about this every single day because I try to use these questions as the lens through which I filter all of my business decisions and ideally my personal decisions as well. I do think I'm living the dream in all of the complexities of the dream. So as I said, like there's positive emotions, there's harder emotions. You run a business too. There's moments of elation, there's moments of frustration, there's when things go great, and there's all the back end and the admin and the team, like all the things. But because I think I'm such an entrepreneur at heart, and because I feel like I'm making such a genuine difference and getting to just talk back to the very beginning, David, like getting to teach the things that I think were so useful to me and that I know from hearing from others are useful to them. It's what I get to share all day. Yes, I am living my dream then. I am bringing all of a lifelong of experiences and training and unique challenges and just who I am and what I can bring to this and getting to create new things every day, which I love. Do I want to scale? Yes, because it allows me to impact more people in a positive way. That's part of what the academy allows me to do is leverage, create content as you're doing with Lawline, create content once and leverage it, be able to put together programs. And whether I have 10 people in my virtual room or 1,000, I'm able to leverage myself because I can only coach I have a number of coaching clients. I can only handle so many. That's the least leveraged of my options. I only have so many hours in the day. So there's only a handful of people that I can coach privately. I can only do so many speaking invitations, even if they're virtual. Like they're very time intensive, all the prep, the back end, the energy output. I can only do so many. But with the academy, I can pour in energy and it can just magnify itself. But the question I'm always asking and feel like there must be an answer that I continue to search for, how to do that in a way that doesn't undermine my own well-being. Because I always say the saddest thing is when you see well-being professionals who are totally burnt to a crisp, right? I want to walk my own talk. And so right now I'm building a team to help support me. And you have an incredible team. You just said you got back from a team retreat. You're taking good care of your people and together you're building this business. I need more hands to help me. And so I'm building that so that I'm not trying to do it all by myself. I would say I could have a nice, tight, tiny business by myself and it'd be perfectly sufficient to do what I need to do for my family, or I could have a greater impact. And through me, like my husband and I agree, we love to be generous. We don't keep money for ourselves. We're just a channel through which, like, we love giving money to other organizations, to worthy causes. Like we're just out there to do good work and to channel the money through us in a way to other great organizations. So it's just a win-win in a lot of different ways. But yes, the entrepreneur in me will not. I tried for a minute to stay small and the dream is too big and the opportunity to serve is too big. So I'm excited to figure out ways to do that still help me take good care of myself and the people that I'm responsible to and my family.
Just know you're not alone in trying to solve the puzzle of what's next. We're still trying to solve. We're always trying to solve that puzzle at Lawline and in my life. And yes, I don't know if I said it offline or on the podcast, but yes, we just come back from a retreat in Montana with our entire company, which was beautiful and great and took a lot of time and energy to do. We also do a rotating 4-day work week. So every other Friday, half the company is off, as the goal to recognize that burnout is real and we're thinking about the long term. And so I get that. And the puzzle of going from, this is the age-old puzzle, going from keynote speaker to an online academy is an interesting one and a challenging one for the same reasons. It's hard. What we just said, it's the $299. It's building it up. And of course we sell CLE. And so maybe that's an opportunity in what you're going to do as well. And you start offering it to your clients. You offer 100 or 10 or 20 on-demand courses to your clients. By the way, you can do that on Lawline now. We built this. I don't know if you know this. No,
I've already been talking to your team.
Right, but we do have a way to host the content now that just because why recreate the wheel, especially if it's for CLE. We're trying to help people like you try to figure this out. And I would say yes. And I think the energy, while it takes so much energy to give the talk, you get so much energy. And I would be amiss if we did not mention this at the very end. You are doing a talk with my sister, Michelle Richmond, in July at PDI in Chicago. Is it Chicago?
In Chicago.
PDC, I'm sorry. PDC in Chicago. Can you share what that talk is and what the focus is?
Yes, really aligned with what we're talking about in terms of values and figuring out what truly motivates you and making choices and decisions based on that values alignment. What matters most and how do you use that to align your work, your life, your decisions with that? And I have a husband, we're about to be 25 years married, 25-year anniversary in 2 weeks. I have 3 kids. 1 with special needs, 2 are adopted. Life is full and complex, and we have to figure out ways to show up for all these people in different ways with their different needs from us, and which hat we're wearing. Am I mom? Am I wife? Am I speaker? Am I consultant? Am I coach? And show up with the best of myself to offer, and to make sure it's values aligned.
And it just reminds me, like, when you're talking to somebody, you don't know what their backstory is and all that's going on in their life. This is the last question. Is there a video on YouTube? Because I didn't see it, but maybe I didn't search the right thing, where we could see you playing piano.
Oh, I don't know. I've thought about putting some out there. I'll try to find one.
I would love to see you play if that's available. No, because you mentioned it many times, and it's one thing to hear. I would love to hear it too. Is there anywhere I can hear it without? Or you could share.
Find that, right there. Like I said, I sub at churches, so you can go to their service and find it. But I'd have to tell you which one. You'd be like, I think that's Kendra at the piano. But I actually recorded a cassette tape in high school, and I was again just entrepreneurial of like holiday music, and I made it for my family. But then I was gonna sell it too. Like, I love recording. There is a recording of me ringing handbells. I ring handbells too. So I was like the featured handbell ringer on a recording recently.
It might be a unique post on LinkedIn if you record yourself playing something.
I've done a little bit. We did a program, a musician one, and then those who follow me on LinkedIn know I often I play with a group of flute players that are all lawyers and legal professionals.
Wow.
We're actually playing the bar memorial this Friday for all the lawyers who have passed in our local county bar. So they're playing flute and I'm playing piano. We do holiday music. We just do fundraisers within the legal community for free because we just love playing together. So that's a fun way to catch us. So we're getting known in our local Minneapolis market. Music ipsa loquitur is our
totally. I mean, I give you such credit for all that you do, from musician to speaking to mom to volunteer. And you just mentioned adopting 2 kids. Again, we have to cut this off at some point because whatever, but I would love to learn more. And now I'm so glad that we had this opportunity. We definitely couldn't have gone this deep at dinner. It was too loud in there and doing that. Great. And hopefully others will get value from all that you do and that you provide. So thanks again.
I appreciate that, David. If anybody has any questions on anything we've covered, and I'm also always happy to talk. Like, I talk to a lot of other adoptive parents or parents with special needs kids, or any way in which I can serve. Back to the very beginning where we started. If I have a shortcut or a tool or just an empathetic ear that I can lend, I'm here for it. So I really appreciate the opportunity to just share from my journey and to be a part of this amazing conversation with you.
Thank you so much, Kendra.
Good to see you, David.
Bye.
Bye.